All right, looks like everybody's lit up. All right, their microphones. All right. At 6 p.m., I would like to call the December 5th, 2024 meeting of the Credit River Planning Commission to order. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone. Our first order of business this evening is to approve or amend the agenda. All commission members have received a copy of tonight's agenda. The agenda for this evening includes 3 public hearings, including a proposed text amendment for section 7-2-1 bed and breakfast establishments. Consider a conditional use permit application for a bed and breakfast at 6465 170th Street East. And consider a proposed ordinance and public hearing on ordinance proposed ordinance 2024-03 administrative citations. Under general business, we have city parks and trails planning. Does anyone want to add or amend anything to tonight's agenda? Seeing no amendments, can I get a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
I make a motion to approve.
I have a motion from Commissioner Tandy. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a commissioner as second from Commissioner Thieberab. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? That motion carries. As we have no items under the consent agenda this evening, we will move to our public hearings tonight. Our first public hearing relates to a proposed text amendment review request to section 7.2.1 bed and breakfast establishments. Commission members have received the staff memo dated November 26, 2024, copy of the application dated October 16th, 2024, and copies of correspondence received to date about the application. Before I open the public hearing, I'd like to ask city staff to summarize the conditional use permit application and the request for the text amendment, please.
Thank you, Chair Olson and commissioners. Do you want me to do both applications right now or
Let's
just
do
the text amendment? Okay,
first.
perfect. Thank you. Yeah, so the first public hearing and application in your packet for consideration this evening is for a text amendment to section 7-2-1, which is the bed and breakfast establishments conditions of approval section of the zoning ordinance. So while the city of Credit River does not have a bed and breakfast definition, we do have a set of performance standards that the applicants must meet to be considered for a conditional use permit to operate a bed and breakfast. And this evening, we have a request to amend sub-bullet number 3 of that section, which currently reads, the owner or manager of the facility shall live on site. The proposed the proposed change is to add on site or no farther than 4 miles from the facility. This was initiated by the applicants. That would also that the conditional use permit application that is running sort of concurrently with this request. And we've listed a number of findings of fact in the staff report as to why at this time staff is recommending denial, but be happy to answer any questions before or after the public hearing and can give any more information you need. But yeah.
Thank you, Planner Strickler. Before I open the public hearing, would the applicant or their representative care to address the Planning Commission? If so, could you please approach the podium and state your name and address for the record?
My wife and I are the applicants. My name is Nat McGee, and my wife is Perry. Our current residence is on Crestview Lane. And we're the ones that have purchased the property at 6465 Lincoln Street. As background, we moved here 2 years ago from Reno, Nevada, where we lived for over 30 years. We both had businesses there, active in the community. But in 2020, when the world shut down with COVID, my wife got COVID, one of the first cases there. And as you recall, healthcare wasn't the greatest. So one of the follow-ups from that was that she ended up with COVID. And so, long story short, a cardiologist at the Mayo Clinic in Phoenix, which we were going to at the time, said that we needed to move somewhere under 1,500-foot elevation, and to live in a house with no stairs. So it needed to be all one level, under 1,500-foot elevation. And after extensive search, we found this beautiful home here on Crestview that met all requirements. Once we moved here, my wife prior to that was owner of a brick and mortar quilting and sewing store in Reno, Nevada. And so she's had decades of experience with quilting and sewing, and especially teaching. And so she found that she could still teach online, and did so after COVID, and did so after we moved, where she continues to teach online. But as her health improved here, with the lower elevation and excellent doctors at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, she found that she could start doing more. And so in 2023, she did an in-person retreat for her sewing students, and did it north here, about 2 hours north of the cities. Establishment there, did about a week retreat in person, and it was a great success, loved it. And so she started thinking about how she could do that, because there's a great need for quilting and sewing retreats and locations for them. And so started exploring that and looking in different locations and closer to us. We contacted the city of Prior Lake about the idea of purchasing a home as an additional property to hold retreats. And they immediately said, no, that can't be done within the city limits. And so we talked to our realtor, Ms. Marie, and she said, well, Crater River is a city, has her own rules, let's contact them. And so she reached out to Matt and explained the situation again. We're looking for an additional property to hold quilting retreats. Would that be allowed within the city of Crater River? And he said, yes, that shouldn't be a problem. We'd need to apply for a conditional use permit, and we can handle, walk you through all the paperwork, once you purchase the property. And so we proceeded on that, again, just verbal approval, and purchased the property, and then contacted Matt again and said, oh, we're ready to on the paperwork. Had a Zoom meeting with Matt and Claire and Eric at that time. And that's when they started saying, well, this doesn't really fit into any of our approved uses. Only one that might fit would be a bed and breakfast establishment. Because we do have, it would be an overnight stay. Not a hotel, it's not anything, it's a multiple day overnight stay for hotels and all the things. And so we said, okay, this is a surprise. We thought it would just be filling out paperwork. And so, well, are you living on the property? I'm like, no, this is a second property. One of the things we didn't explain at the time is that we physically cannot live at that property because of my wife's health restrictions. She still has restrictions that she can't live in a place with stairs. And if any of you are familiar with that property, there are a lot of stairs in that house. It's like 4 different levels. So living there is not possible. Visiting there, teaching there, is okay in a limited use. It's just not possible to live there magically. And so we applied for this text amendment that would allow us, one of the suggestions by Eric at the time was, maybe we can put some restrictions on this that owner wouldn't have to live on the property as long as they were a member of Credit River, a resident of Credit River within a certain distance of the property. And so that's kind of how this text amendment came to be was. The owner would only have to live within 4 miles. Our current residence is 3.9 miles from that house. And so I think that's how it came to be. I didn't see in the text amendment a restriction that they needed to be a resident of Credit River. That was discussed. And we had another meeting by Zoom with Terry and I came and sat with Matt and Claire and Eric, and I think the city attorney as well was on that meeting. We discussed it again and we put together that packet. Subsequent to that meeting, my wife was diagnosed with cancer, and so she's going through chemotherapy treatment. And that's what she might be here tonight. It's a very immune system. But that is kind of the long and short story of how this came to be. The purpose of the residence would be to just hold retreats, quilting retreats. There's plenty of parking on site. Would be no, we would make it clear that there's no parking on the street. There would be no need for parking on the street. There would be 8 to 12 women at a time at these retreats. And that's, the retreats would generally last 2 to 5 days, depending on who wants to come and use that. Yeah, any question?
Do any of the planning commission members have questions at this time?
I guess I have one thing. After that meeting, did you subsequently get a follow-up email confirmation, a letter of approval of your intent?
Approval of our intent? No.
I know it has to get approved, it has to go through the proper chain, but did you get anything of a direction as to how and what needed to be done to move forward, or did you get anything from the city?
When we had the last meeting where Carrie and I sat with Matt and by Zoom, Claire and Eric and the city attorney, they gave us direction at that time. We had already filled out the packet, but hadn't included something about the text amendment, and so we revised the packet to include the need for a text amendment, and so we filled that out with Matt's help and submitted that to Matt. And along the way, we had received verbal encouragement that this shouldn't be a big deal, that it did need to be approved, but they were very positive that this would be allowed and be okay. So when we got the packet Monday and said that they were recommending denial, that came as a great shock to us. So it was their recommendations of how we should proceed.
Do any of the other planning commissioners have questions at this time? We can.
One of the things I wanted to suggest is that if you're going to be ruling on it tonight, or is this just going to be, we're going to now review it?
So I think in terms of process, our staff probably can outline that best as to what happens at these hearings.
Sure, so after the public hearing, the commissioners will close the public hearing and they'll discuss it based on staff's report, what they heard this evening, and then we can make a recommendation to the city council. The city council will have the final say. So if the plan commission recommends approval, the council can still deny it or vice versa. The council tends to listen to the planning commission because they've held the public hearing. But that's not always the case. And they also can table that application if they determine that there's more information needed before they make their decision. So they're all recommendations, but if it were to be recommended to table tonight, it would not move on to council until that further information that they might request is submitted.
I would just request that if it looks like it's going to be denied this time, that we table it so that we can consult with our council and work with the city more to figure out a better way to arrange this.
I have a question, I guess. So does your wife intend on being there for all or the majority of the retreats or for whoever's renting it out? Is she gonna be there present for, I understand she can't live there, but I mean, would you assume she'd be there for
Yeah,
the,
most of the time, she'll be the one teaching.
okay,
She'll be the instructor for the retreats.
sure,
We would be there during the day. She can teach.
sure.
Yeah,
I do have a question. Is this intended to be a income producing venture for you and your wife?
we will be charging for it, so hopefully there will be income coming. That's why we're applying for a business permit is for that nature. It's not enough.
Okay, so it is intended to be a profit maker. In your past, when you were, I guess you had the operation in was it Reno, Nevada. How did that do?
Really well. She, one of the top quilt shops in the country. And yeah, she was really good.
Was the facility that you had in Reno, Nevada, was it similar to what you're looking at right now?
No, it was a brick and mortar retail shop. So she had a retail location, in a strip. It was over 5,000 square feet of sewing and quilting supplies and teaching.
Okay, so it wasn't in a residential area like that you're in now.
No, she doesn't plan on having a retail business. It'll just be instruction,
Yeah,
teaching.
just a retreat place, and then you charge your fees and whatever for lodging or everything like that.
That's it.
And so I guess, I don't know what the market is here versus Reno, Nevada. If you needed, you think that there's enough interest in the area here to support that facility as far as?
Yeah, she put out some feelers on Facebook and different quilting groups, and there were a number from across the country that said, let us know immediately once this is approved and up and running, because we want to. So it's not just from this immediate area, they'd be bringing in people from all over the country.
Would, in part of your business model, would you be using any other activity? I was looking at your retreats, you talk about specific projects and using yoga and card making and embroidery. Then you also on number 3, Creekside would rent the facility to private groups for 2 or more nights to offer their own instruction work or whatever retreat. So you would be entertaining other types of groups there other than creative, quilting groups.
Well, they would be all creative groups of some sort, whether it's making cards, quilting, sewing, and there may be groups that are like, at first, I don't see this happening, but maybe down the road where an instructor says, I've got my own group, I want to teach them and use your facility. Can we rent that out and use your facility to
So,
teach them?
so it wouldn't be used for any other purpose other than for what you're saying, for these creative activities?
Yeah, that's all we want.
Okay, with the wedding receptions or things like that, or
No,
one use it as like an event center or anything like that, but simply.
just, like we said, 8 to 12 people, are staying there, or some type of instruction. 2 to 5 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, so it was well known it was residential when you purchased it, correct? Did you consider getting the variance prior to making the purchase?
No, because we were told by Matt that, we do that once we obtain property.
Sure.
We can't do it before we obtain.
Yeah, sure. Would you consider, operating it out of your home in Crestview?
It's not really, it doesn't have space for it. One, it doesn't have the number of bedrooms that we need, more than workspace. That house is 64, 65 is uniquely set up for something like this, where there's a number of bedrooms, and a large space for doing the teaching.
All right,
Can I have one more question?
yes, and we will then open the public hearing.
One last question, when you were in a strip mall location when you're in Reno, did you try to find a similar location in this area?
No, at that time, she was so busy running the brick and mortar store that she wasn't doing any retreats. This only came up within the last couple of years where looked at it. The ladies she was teaching online wanted to get together in person and meet and have instruction, so that's where that came.
Okay, at this time, thank you so much. At this time, I would like to open the public hearing. Are there any residents here tonight who wish to present or talk about this text variance application? If so, would you please step up to the podium and state your name and address before you make your comments?
Hi, my name is Jimmy. I live right across the street. If he's able to get what he's looking for, whatever the heck you guys are doing there, would he do the weddings and stuff in the future? I know what he said no, but could he do that? If you guys pass what he's trying to do.
Would staff be able to talk to the conditions of the conditional use permit aspect?
Yes.
And what the text amendment means in this
Sure.
instance.
Yes, absolutely. So the conditional use permit that would, should it be approved or permitted, would only allow for the operations of a bed and breakfast as outlined in section 721, the part that we're also looking at the potential amendment for. Events and events or weddings would have to be allowed as part of this permit. The way that staff has drafted the permit, should that be approved, does not include additional events other than what is outlined in the applicant's proposal this evening. So.
I got one more.
Absolutely.
It'd be a brothel. Could
No.
it be
Good idea.
2 to 5 days? I worry about that. I live across the street. The house has always been kind of an active house. But all the lights coming, you drive, cars coming in and out of the driveway, it goes right in my windows. I know there's some neighbors here that probably think about noise and stuff like that too, so. I guess, I hear what you're saying, it sounds great. It is a beautiful house. Lots of room, I get what, I can see it being something that people would wanna use for 2 to 5 days, but I'm worried about when it don't work out. I feel your wife sounds like with cancer and stuff, I'm sorry to hear that, but I'm gonna be around, sorry, but I'm thinking about myself. So, could something like that happen? If this thing was to pass, whatever he's looking for. So I don't know the words, but I didn't expect it to either. No, I don't know if I asked a good enough question. I just worry about. It's our neighborhood. We got cars now. The street's pretty busy, even though it's 35 miles an hour. I don't know if we want more people coming and going all the time. That's what I'm worried about.
Sure. So in terms of other uses that could maybe come out of a permit, again, we have the conditional use permit with restrictions that the code already outlines for operation of a business such as a bed and breakfast, as well as other conditions that the city staff has recommended bulk up those regulations. So if some type of different business were operating under that permit, it'd be an immediate violation. And then we go through the enforcement
How do you
process.
enforce the permits? So take one of us probably to say something. Or-
Sure. So actually that policy is on the agenda this evening for implementation with the city. So I don't know if Administrator Johnson wants to, I didn't write that policy. If you want to
I think that's.
briefly speak up.
Madam Chair, members, the item that's on your agenda relates to administrative fines. It's another tool of enforcement. It separates it from frankly, the court system or intense civil or criminal action. So that's something the city always has, but the administrative fine process is a simpler tool that the council is asking to consider. And would be one of few different arrows they could use to enforce terms and conditions. I think from a process standpoint, the first thing, the city isn't driving around looking for violations, so to speak, but if there's a known violation and somebody calls, we have a duty to investigate it and enforce them.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak this evening on the text amendment? Good evening. Would you state your name and your address for the record, please?
I'm Deanna. My address is 17124 Johanna Drive. My backyard butts up to the backyard of this property. And I'm not sure with there being two different items, I don't know if I should go through all of my concerns now or if some of them are more appropriate later. As far as the text amendment, having them live 4 miles away, I don't think that being 4 miles away provides any reassurance that things will be under control at that property. Especially after hours when classes are done, what would prevent any of these guests from inviting all their friends over or, larger gatherings once the classes are over? So that's a big concern with noise and safety when it comes to those things. With enforcement, if a neighbor or someone in our area has issues with what's going on at that home, who would we contact if there's no one there on site that's responsible for what's going on? Are we supposed to go down the road 4 miles and find the property owner? So I'm just questioning what the enforcement process would look like. I know that Credit River does not have a whole lot of staff, so I don't know if there would be a way to contact someone at Credit River, nights, evenings, weekends, those sorts of things. So without having some sort of responsibility there at that property, I don't think that the amendment should be changed to allow someone to live away from that property. I have other concerns too, but I don't know if that's appropriate for this point or if I should just go ahead and say them.
Sure, you.
At this point, I think that's fine. As these two items are related to one another. I understand it can be difficult to differentiate.
Okay. And some of them are similar to this gentleman's past concerns as far as the type of use. If we allow this to be a short-term rental sort of situation. I know that their plan is to be crafting, but conditional use stays with the property, so if the crafting business goes away, what's going to prevent that property from becoming some other sort of short-term rental situation? So that's a huge concern. When you look at other neighboring cities, for example, you mentioned that Prior Lake does not allow this. A lot of other cities in our area do not allow them. Apple Valley, Bloomington, Burnsville, Chanhassen, Chaska, Eagan, New Prairie, Lakeville, Savage, Shakopee. I don't think Credit River wants to open up that opportunity, when a lot of cities around us are not doing short-term rentals like this. I've seen data that when you allow a short-term rental to someone to take a residential property and turn it into a short-term rental, that opens up other properties from being bought out by investors, and that can lower property values because investors are buying properties and renting them out or turning them into short-term rentals. So even though we're talking about this one property, if we allow this property to do it, what's going to prevent properties from other neighborhoods in Credit River from doing the same thing? You know, someone could buy a house in one of these other bigger neighborhoods with large properties and large pools. And if they say they want to be some other kind of retreat, that put Credit River in a difficult position, having to allow that, if we allow it for the quilters and the crafters. So that's a huge concern as well. It's my understanding that once a CUP is approved, it's very difficult to take it back. So I'm not sure that's the route we want to go with allowing a conditional use permit to remain with this property. Because it could be a very difficult process to get it taken away if it becomes an issue. When you look at what is out there as far as short-term rentals, most cities who go down that pathway do it in a way where there's a licensing process in place and open to people to revoke that license. So I encourage Credit River not to jump into allowing this sort of use without thinking on what the domino effect could be with other properties in Credit River besides this one. As someone who lives in the neighborhood next door to this property, noise and safety is obviously a huge concern, especially if someone isn't at that property controlling who's there. What's can stop them from having parties after hours? There's lots of parking space way in the back. There's a huge shed. There's a pool. It would be the prime place to have things get out of hand. So those are my concerns. Thank you.
Okay. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on the request for text amendment? Good evening. Would you state your name and your address for the record?
My name is Delmeyer. I reside at 6525 170 Street East. I am the property owner immediately to the east. I think the driveway is maybe 20 feet off property line. Madam Chair and Planning Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I have submitted a letter. My letter spoke to when you allow a text amendment like this to benefit one property owner, you are potentially creating what I would call a benefit for only one user. And now you've opened it up to everybody. You've already heard some concerns tonight. Think about if this was next to you and all the unknowns that are gonna go with it. The narrative that was provided in the application said nothing about beds, said nothing about breakfast, right? Nothing about being a bed and breakfast, it's a retreat center. It does not meet the spirit and the intent of what people think of as a bed and breakfast. Claire mentioned earlier that nowhere in the code is bed and breakfast defined. Most cities then refer back to the dictionary or the definition. Look up what a bed and breakfast is. It's a place to come stay, meals are served on site, and there's an owner or manager on site. The previous speaker spoke to other cities not allowing it. I would say that Prior Lake and Lakeville, which are immediately adjacent to us, require an owner or manager on site, as well as Scott County ordinances. I worked in local government for 20 years. I've seen different things. I've worked with inspectors in Dakota, Scott, and Hennepin County. And they will tell you the number one thing with any sort of short-term rental, VRBO, any type of use that's not primarily a resident living in a residential home is the nuisance they create. I will not go further into my letter that spoke more to like making this change now allows it everywhere in Credit River. And as previously stated, what's the next retreat? What's the next big idea? But I don't have to live on site to make that happen. And even at 4 miles away, what's the difference if you're 40 miles away or 400 miles away? You're still not on site. And I am on site. I have to live next door. Saying 4 miles is just kind of a random thing again, because the next applicant will say, we want to live 16 miles away. Amend your code again. I think the use speaks more to a short-term rental instead of a bed and breakfast. The applicant already owns a home in Credit River. They have the opportunity, they have the commercially bed center there, a VRBO, whatever this is, whatever they want to offer. They already have their own home to do it on site there. The current owner has owned it for a couple months. And as a neighbor next door, there has been no shrub maintenance completed. Tree limbs are broken off and are hanging over our property for months. No leaf pickup has occurred on the property since they've taken over. The exterior lights, if you've ever driven by there in the evening, have been on 24/7. So beyond what the minimum building code is, there's a ton of decorative lights. Our bedroom is 50 feet off that property line and they shine into our primary suite. So we've had this nuisance the entire time. They talk about a rental for 2 to 5 days. So every week, my husband and I and our neighbors will be like, what's coming next? Because last week the group was loud. Again, we have no idea what to expect. 8 to 12 cars, that's a lot of doors slamming throughout the day. It's a lot of disruption to what is considered a residential neighborhood. They have no intention of operating a bed and breakfast by not living on site. And they mentioned earlier, Prior Lake said no. I am sorry to hear that the applicant has some health problems. I think some of us will find that we're gonna realize we have anxiety we never knew we have, because again, we're never gonna know what's coming in next. Oh, they were loud the first night, that means I'm not gonna get any sleep a second night. My husband and I work full-time jobs. I want quiet time, we go to bed early. I wanna enjoy my weekends. He mentioned his wife is one of the top quilters in the country. I would argue my husband is one of the top craftsmen you will ever find. If you're familiar with where I live, the home was built in 1968. It was owned by one family for 40 years. If you have driven by, we have basically rebuilt that home. We made a huge investment in our property. We chose Credit River and the opportunity to make that property ours. And part of the draw was the beautiful home next door. I never would have thought I'd be living next to a retreat center in a residential neighborhood. Somebody spoke earlier to all the traffic. That cut through, we get all the time there's traffic. And now you're adding more to it in addition to, as Jim mentioned, all the lights are gonna shine on his home. Steve and I are going to hear the car door slamming at night. It's just really, I take a step back and really think this through, because as many people have mentioned, this CUP stays with the property. What is next? And once you've started this, where does it stop? And I hope that you think about the community as a whole, because if you didn't think this could happen to you, I ask you to think again, because I never would have thought this could happen to me. And it's just, it may be good intention until it doesn't work out well. And then, well, you know what, we're just having one baby shower, and one baby shower then leads to a bachelorette party. Then it leads to a 50th birthday party. If you've ever seen that property, it is beautiful. That backyard is an oasis. And Brennan and Jen were wonderful neighbors. They took care of that property. Jen was in the flower gardens every weekend, but Brendan finally said 7 acres was too much to take care of. The kids grew up, their kids stopped using the pool as much as they used to, but when new people come in every week, the pool's a great amenity. It becomes a party place. And it doesn't belong in a residential neighborhood, and I'm sorry if, you know, they purchased the home without getting everything in place before they did that, but I did my homework. We chose to move to Credit River. I wanted to be here, and I've made an investment in my property. They have an investment in another property where this could be located, and nobody has to amend a text amendment. Nobody has to draft up a short-term rental agreement, licensing program. Administrative citations can maybe wait. I think the city has so many other pressing things to cover that this just isn't it. And I strongly encourage you to really think through these decisions, because once it's made, it's made. And if you allow this, I think you're opening up Pandora's box for what's next. And the bed and breakfast language is gonna be asked to be amended all the time, instead of actually taking the time to figure out what does a short-term rental look like, and what I would call a commercial event center. So thank you for your time, and I'm available for any other questions you may have.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on the text amendment? Is there anyone else who would like to speak about the text amendment?
7690 Crestview Drive. I'm speaking on behalf as a resident of City of Credit River and a resident of Crestview. Commissioner Martell had a question about whether this operation could be done in Crestview. And Crestview has a declaration that's filed with the county, and it's got covenants on what you can do in Crestview Estates. And this is not something that can be done in that home. So I just want to clarify that, because I heard that from the commissioner and from somebody. So
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to the text amendment? Please approach, state your name and address for the record, please.
Steve Delmeyer, 6525 170th Street, direct neighbors to this property. This comment very short. So if it's not allowed in Crestview, one of the things we reached out to the city for was to kind of find out what the HOAs were in the Credit River. We expected that Crestview probably doesn't allow it, and so I think we could probably glean from that if it's not allowed there, is probably not a good thing. If it's not a good thing, why would you allow it at this property that's next to ours? Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak about the text amendment? there anyone else who wishes to speak about the text amendment? Anyone else wishing to speak about the text amendment specifically? Seeing none. Could I get a motion to close the public hearing on the text amendment?
Move that we close the public hearing for the text amendment.
I have a motion from Commissioner Thebrath. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a second from Commissioner Martell. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. This is the time for planning commission members to ask additional questions that they have. And
So are we just talking about just the 4 mile text amendment?
we are talking about the text amendment
Okay.
specifically at this stage, yes.
So I guess just on that part, I'd say the 4 mile part kind of doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me if we're gonna do it. Either it shouldn't be 4 miles, it should either be unlimited or we're not doing, because yeah, if you make it 4 miles, you're essentially just doing it for this particular situation, and that's not, yeah. I don't think that's what we want to do, so I'm not, in favor of changing it at all, but if we're going to, I don't think the 4 miles is the number we should go with.
Can staff talk to us about the implication of a text amendment that applies to an entire zoning district? I think it would be helpful for context to talk about what that means for future applications or similar sorts of establishments.
Yes, 1 sec. Firstly, I do also, just on the topic of kind of where the 4 miles came from, I just want to clarify that when this initially was floated, it was discussed saying something like, has a property homesteaded in Credit River or the city of Credit River residents, and the city attorney wasn't comfortable with that language. I can't remember his specific reasoning, but his recommendation was more of the radius location to whatever property it is. So that's where that language came from rather than proposing it as a city of Credit River resident. And then as to your question, Chair Olson, is so bed and breakfasts are conditionally permitted or allowed as conditional uses in every zoning district in the city of Credit River, except for commercial and industrial. So R1, R2, R3, UER, UERC, and rural residential. So significant impact as your commercial and industrial parcels are 5 in total, I think. And we could pull the zoning map up if for the screens, if you folks would like that.
I think that might be helpful
that,
just
Matt?
to help people understand.
Yeah.
Please.
And any other questions while Matt's pulling that up? I'm happy to answer.
But just to be clear, the city does not allow an Airbnb or.
Correct. So the way that the city's code is written is you have in section 20-4, which is on page 220 of the zoning ordinance, is the start of all of your table of uses. So church, cemetery, daycare center, farmers markets, etc. Everything that may be allowed. If it's not specifically listed in that use chart, then the code does have provisions that are pretty specific to that. It essentially comes down to a decision. It's not allowed unless the city council makes a determination, which at that point would also lead to a text amendment of that new use that would then be added into the use table. So short-term rental is not currently listed in the use table.
So Claire, when, at what time is it go from a short-term to a long-term rental? Like how many, can you rent it for a month or what? Yeah.
So it really depends on the city's ordinance. A lot of communities that have short-term rental allowances with those licenses that some community members spoke about this evening have a max rental period that I think it is 30 days, and then they have to not rent it for a week, and then it can start back
Sure.
over to prevent like those kind of like, oh, I'm gonna rent this for 6 months while my house is getting built or something. And some communities do allow that, but again, a lot of that comes from different license types that a lot of times, let's say if you're living on site and you've finished your basement and they have a separate entry, that's one license type. And then that I'm living off site, but I'm keeping check, that's another license type that likely has some more rigorous requirements. So that's typically how they're broken out in communities that allow them. So Matt has the zoning map up. So the only parcels, and sorry, this is kind of small for folks in the audience, but the pink and the purple that are in the middle there, and then that one pink next to the big regional park there, those are the only commercial / industrial parcels in the community. So
all the other zoning districts that exist would allow.
good if they met
If they-
those standards in 721,
Okay.
which I think there's 8 standards that are listed. I had them listed in your, 10. They have to meet those 10 performance standards that are the conditions of approval. So maximum 6 units. Have the state license if applicable, owner, manager living on site. Principal structure has to be the minimum size of 1,500 square feet. It can't be located like in an accessory building on the property. An employee. The dining facility is not open to the public. At least 2 off-street parking spaces, not more than 1 sign, and adequate lighting. So that's pretty similar. So again, as Credit River does not have the definition, we did just take a look at the state statute. Now, that doesn't mean the city can enforce what the state has, but it's pretty in line. There are a few conditions that are a little stricter on the state level that we may want to consider in the future, but yeah, it's not too far off, other than the state does provide a definition with their performance standards. Go ahead.
Mind if I may, do you mind reading those for, I don't know if you have it handy.
You have it handy?
I do.
Oh, if you don't mind reading it. I know your mic's a little squeaky.
In statutes, just on the, thank you, Mayor. Somebody's gotta know what's going on. So statute 340A.4011 bed and breakfast facilities. And the underlying parameter of this statute stems from liquor licensing. And I suspect in the conversation over time about not requiring those type of facilities to get liquor license if it's just a limited service of wine or something. And the second subdivision does talk about that, but the first subdivision has 4 points. They're relatively short. Number 1, they define a bed and breakfast facility means a place of lodging that provides not more than 8 rooms for rent to no more than 20 guests at a time, is located on the same property as the owner's personal residence, provides no meals other than breakfast served to persons who rent rooms, and finally, was originally built and occupied as or was converted to a single-family residence prior to being used as a place of lodging. So those are the 4 things, and they're, as Planner Stickler mentioned, what is thought of as a bed and breakfast. I think maybe most of us would agree, and those seem to be the case. So.
That is very helpful. Thank you, sir. Are there other questions that the planning commission members have at this time?
I just like to make a comment. We follow a lot of our, because we kind of fell underneath the Prior Lake rules and regulations, and I do know that back in it was the year right before COVID, this was a hot item in Prior Lake, and a lot of people, and as we all are, sensitive to our neighbors. You don't want to be the Hatfields and McCoys, right? And I was on a committee with that in 19. And the problem was, is a lot of people were buying up these little lake houses on Prior Lake. Or they were starting VRBOs, Airbnbs. And I know when I rent a party, I'm gonna have fun. And who cares the aftermath after that? But the poor neighbors and these people that bought on the lake, it also drilled down to the use of lakeshore property, where you would have the older widowed lady who's probably never operated a boat or hadn't in decades. And next thing you know, they would have up to 7 boats being rented there. And as you know, being around the lake, there's not a lot of parking. But then they would rent those slips out for $3,000 to $4,000 a piece. So then each boat has so many people, and then it's the loud noise of coming down with coolers, dogs, and the mess. So probably put a big hold on that, or put heavy restrictions on it, from 7 boats down to like 5. And there were a couple of outfits that had short-term rentals, and they made a concession to that if there were these families that had been renting the said properties out for years after years for family events and people coming over all over from the United States for a family reunion. And they let them keep that on the docket for a certain amount of time, and then they had to cut it off. And it just made the community a lot more quiet, and everybody got along. And so I guess we're all sensitive to that, and that was just one of the big things that Prior Lake had to deal with.
Are there other questions or comments that the members of the commission have?
Chairperson Wilson, I have a comment. We are talking about section 7 of our own ordinances, specialty housing. And just to bring out 7.1, which is purpose. And it says here, the purpose of this section is to establish performance standards for residential uses that operate beyond the scope of traditional housing. These standards should be applied to ensure that these specialty housing, which we're talking about bed and breakfasts, these specialty housing uses are reasonably compatible with their surrounding environment. And I think what we're hearing a lot tonight is, what we're seeing tonight is, there's not a lot of compatibility with the surrounding environment. Also too, as far as making a change to an ordinance for just the sole purpose of one particular entity, I'm somewhat against that. I think if there's ever a change to an ordinance, and you remember I set up one before, that it should apply to the community as a whole. It should have something that has an overall use to everybody in the community, and not to the benefit of just one or a very few. So that's just sort of my thinking along that. Thank you.
Are there other planning commission members who wish to make comments or ask additional questions?
I think another hard part too is as Commissioner Casey mentioned, is that the language on that 4 mile, that is, let's be real, if the cat's away, the mice are gonna play. And if you're not disrupting the person who is on site, nobody's gonna know, but the neighbors sure will. So that's just something that really needs to be thought through and be methodical about, and have like tight language on.
I can understand the attractiveness of the property. I am a crafter myself. I understand, while I have not done retreats, that they can be really enjoyable experiences. And as I look at the application and the request for the text amendment, I think the thing that concerns me is that we need to make the decision based on the good of the community. And while there is great intent on the part of the owner, I don't know that issuing a conditional use permit which runs with the property would necessarily, it would be person dependent, and it makes it very much harder with not being on site to be able to make that first level of enforcement. I'm looking at the findings of fact that our city staff have prepared, and particularly what stands out is number 7. Removing the requirement for full-time occupation of the property fundamentally changes the character of a bed and breakfast, and the property therefore would function more as a short-term rental, Airbnb or VRBO, which currently isn't permitted within the city of Credit River. So those are the things that are standing out to me right now. I can appreciate that. The crafters I know don't tend to be loud, noisy, or otherwise rambunctious sorts of folks, but the text amendment would apply, as I understand it, to any type of bed and breakfast. And that is something that it does concern me about potential. And so I would like us to think more thoughtfully about how we would want to change, if we do, an ordinance that has such a wide wide applicability for our community. And so those are my thoughts as we approach this conversation. Is there anyone else on planning commission who has any additional questions or any additional comment?
One comment, Chairperson Olson, when I'm looking at the sources and uses table, and of course, we talked about everything that has been set up here, and a retreat center does not appear on this, so it is kind of a outlier to everything on here. That's why I think the closest thing they were trying to go to was a bed and breakfast. It's, to me, it seems like this almost needs its own ordinance. Like short-term rental, that's not a bed and breakfast, or something like that, rather than trying to shoehorn something into this to make that work. I think it deserves its own standalone ordinance, if anything, that can apply to a lot of these things that maybe people are concerned about, rather than taking a bed and breakfast ordinance and do something to it which radically or distorts what a bed and breakfast should be. So I think that I don't know if we take the time and effort if we want to try to do something where a new ordinance needs to be created for this type of a business, and it is a business. And it's, I think that we have to maybe look at that as another alternative, rather than try to make alternatives or changes to existing things.
Yeah, I'd kind of piggyback off that. It's, I think, kind of doing Neff and his wife a disservice by calling it a bed and breakfast. It's not, I think they would agree that's not really what it is or what they intend it to be. It's more of a, yeah, you're kind of, yeah, I mean, it's.
Retreat center.
Right. So, yeah.
Okay.
Councilman, planning commission members, and certainly Claire, but correct me if I make a mistake here. So in the conversations staff always have with applicants, and those happen all the time, is that staff are asked, well, what is this and what's that and what can I do? And so city staff has a duty to try to work with an applicant. If you don't try to work with them to some limited extent, then you're kind of viewed as, well, you're being difficult, you're not, so you have to find a balance, and you try to become a shepherd and lead somebody through a process. And in this case, if they did not apply for this CP type thing, we would not be here. They would simply be denied. Because they would not have any latitude to make that application, but for that text. So that is always part of the conversation, is if you want to do something that's kind of close to what you're proposing, you're gonna have to pursue it as a CUP and follow those regulations. We made that very clear. But the first thing, if you want to not follow that living on site thing, is the text.
Got it.
Mhm. No, I think that like is what I was thinking as well, Eric, but also we did have some discussions with the applicants and on a staff level about a new use being created. Now, when you go back to the other conversation we've had about how much this affects more than just this property with a small text amendment change, the same would happen with creating a whole new use in the rural residential district. That is, if you're not under the guise of a bed and breakfast, more towards a commercial type use. And so as staff, we did not go in that direction because of that greater impact for the rural residential district of something geared more in a commercial, not living on that property, versus the guys under the bed and breakfast. So that's how we as staff landed on this shepherding of the bed and breakfast over. Now, again, as any resident, as laid out in the code, can initiate a text amendment at any time, that it could move forward on that path, and we can look at it when we have those application materials on the bigger picture, just like when we have those discussions with the applicants, we don't have everything in front of us until we have a submitted application to the city. So that, you know, it makes it tough in some of those conversations to think one way, and then when the stuff comes on through the desk and you're looking at everything and you're creating the staff report, things change sometimes. So that's kind of how we didn't land on that new use, if that's helpful. Again, that doesn't mean that's not an option. That's just why we didn't recommend that to the applicants.
That's helpful context. Are there any other questions or comments from planning commission members at this time? Staff, anything from your perspectives?
And unless you have more questions.
At this stage, I would entertain a motion on item 3.1, proposed text amendment review request on section 7-2-1 bed and breakfast establishments. Conditions of approval.
I'll make a motion to deny proposed text amendment review request section 721.
I have a motion to deny. Do I have a second for this motion?
Second.
I have a motion from Commissioner Martell and a second from Commissioner Thieberah. All those in favor of the motion to deny, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The motion carries. We'll move on to our second public hearing. This second,
Madam Chair, I think that Neff, when he was giving his discussion, that if there was a denial, that he was wondering if we would consider tabling this.
Hindsight, that would be tabled for his submittal or review under council, isn't that correct?
I think I could use some
Commissioner,
clarification.
You are a recommending body. So. Open the public hearing, have your conversation. Feel you're not comfortable getting the information you desire, you may choose to table it. You could take action on it. Send staff out to collect more information, a number of things. The very least, have public hearing notice published and are here, so if you at the very least can hold that public hearing element, maybe the best thing to do for now. And the minimum thing to do for now.
So your recommendation, sir, would be to hold the public hearing, and then at the conclusion of that public hearing, we could make the decision for motion one way or another, or and including the option to table. Is that correct? Okay.
Well, we passed the motion already.
We passed the motion
It's a
to
different
deny.
subject.
Passed the motion to deny
So
already.
you Okay, so. Okay, Claire,
Sorry.
you can really correct me. So you had two separate actions before you tonight. You have the text amendment. Matter, and you have the CUP matter. So you took action on the text amendment. You have. They're distinct, they're separate things. From one perspective. The applicant could continue with their conditional use permit process. And operate it under the terms and conditions, assuming it was approved by the council. As essentially kind of written, I'm pretty sure Claire is gonna go through that parameter with you. Again, you posted a public hearing, hold a public hearing. If there's more information you desire. You know, you could make a motion to table it. The city does have a deadline of 120 days from, I believe, October 16th, make a decision. You could close the public hearing, you could do a number of things, Claire.
Sure. So I'll just clarify, you're saying that for the CUP application, they could table it, but not the text amendment.
Correct.
Yeah, okay, that's,
Yeah, you've already taken
Yep.
action on the text.
yeah, that's what I wanted to clarify. The motion already passed
Yeah.
for the first item. Yeah,
Yes.
okay,
Yes, okay,
The motion to deny.
for the text amendment, yeah.
Thank you.
yes, okay. Okay, our second public hearing tonight is for the conditional use permit application for the bed and breakfast establishment at 6465 170th Street East that we referenced in our first public hearing. Planning Commission members have received the staff memo dated November 25th, 2024, outlining the conditional permit request and a copy of the application. Staff, is there any additional comment or anything else to walk through with the application at this time?
Yes, the only thing that I would bring to light is page 20 of your packet has staff's recommendation, suggested additional conditions if you were to recommend approval of this permit. This just has additional things aside from the standards outlined in section 7 of the specialty housing regulations, such as maximum guests allowed to sleep over, maximum guests allowed on the property at one time. And then should any other concerns be raised this evening that you want added into these conditions, it's the perfect time to do that, should this move forward to council, such as, you know, noise levels or other things that you may think to help regulate this property. And again, I also want to point out that we do have a condition in there that if the requested text amendment is not approved, then the property owner would either have to occupy it full time or, as the ordinance says, or a full-time manager. And if that's not the case, then staff would recommend denial of the CUP because they wouldn't meet the conditions of specialty housing. So that's all I have.
Does the applicant or the applicant's representative wish to speak?
Yes.
Yes, sorry about that.
To be honest.
I appreciate this opportunity to speak again, regarding, again, I guess the now conditional use permit, without the text amendment. That leaves us with, you know, as I said, my wife can't live there, so we would need to get a full-time manager, to the property. And I appreciate the comments from the community, regarding, that use. I believe the city regulations allow for a bed and breakfast, under the stated stipulations. And so I would ask that that be approved under those situations, stipulations. You know, we may not be serving them and making them breakfast, but they will have And I would be happy to give my personal phone number to the community and neighbors. So they can contact me regarding, anything. Extra lights that need to be removed. There have been a number of constraints being brought up, about the property and the use of it. One of the conversations we've had with the state, we did start at least having conversations with the state about licensing on their end as well. And under their regulations, the pool would be off limits. So we would need to, fence and lock the pool for use. I don't know if that helps the community involved. But that would be off limits for outside occupants use. We may use it personally, but people renting the place may not. Well, I understand the problem with the short-term rent issue. And so I think, maybe the bed and breakfast may solve a lot of that. It's already on the books, and it's allowed under those conditions. And so I just recommend that we can use that.
All right. Are there any residents present tonight who would like to make comment on this particular request for conditional use permit? If so, would you please step up to the podium and state your name and address?
So again, Steve Dolmeyer, 6525 197 Street, property next door. There's a couple of things I'd like to bring up here. I know the applicant's health was part of the question. I would just remind everybody that. Thank you for the neighborhood for showing up too. I appreciate that. I know many are speaking, but I think that you're not hearing anybody speaking for it, is what I'd say. Back to the margin. Yeah, to speak for them. But it's not good for our health as well here, so I think you take that into account. A couple of things, the planning commission, and you know this, I'm sure, but you have the opportunity to deny this. So does the council, when the council does get to this point. You do not have to approve a conditional use permit, so that, I just want to point that out, this is not a must have, must do. We talked about the definition of a bed and breakfast. I did actually look it up. An establishment such as an inn offering lodging and breakfast. Not a retreat center, not an event center, not a VRBO. That is not what a bed and breakfast is. The business plan that was presented by the applicants indicates it used to be somewhere between a commercial event center and a VRBO. It is not a bed and breakfast. So I think I want to be very clear about that. This is not a bed and breakfast. It's not they do not intend to run it as a bed and breakfast. It is a commercial event center or a VRBO. Somewhere in between, but it is not a commercial or not a bed and breakfast. So neither of those are allowed in code. The applicant's business plan does not mention a bed and breakfast at all in it. There's no verbiage of it. The name of the property does not include the term bed and breakfast in it. So if you look up, and I did look up bed and breakfast in the metro area, all of them have say bed and breakfast in them, in their signage and in their literature. There's no mention of a bed and breakfast in there. The owners do not plan to prepare or serve meals on site. By definition, a bed and breakfast serves breakfast, and they serve the breakfast as like a commercial kitchen. There's no intention to do that. They require restaurants license to do that. Guests and renters will come and go at all times of the night and night, day, and year. I mean, which is not typical of bed and breakfast. And the applicant will allow and expect it up to 15 people by their own business plan. 15 people is what they talk about having there, which is probably not not typical that plus the instructors are doing as well. Thank you for looking up, Peter. Thank you for looking up, or Commissioner Fairberth. Sorry for that. Standards of this ordinance 7.1. I mean, I just want to reiterate. I looked that up, and that was one of my talking points. The standards should be applied to ensure that this specialty house uses are reasonably compatible with the surrounding environment. I don't believe it is. Again, it's not a bed and breakfast, so therefore it's not compatible with that. The CUP does not complement the CUP does not complement the city's progress or vision statement. For example, its residents wish to maintain their bedroom community with wide open rural spaces, large homes, and an avid horse community. Does this really fit with what we want Red River to be? I would think that most of us here would think that it does not fit with what the community wants to be. The applicant states, just a comment here, the applicant states the property is heavily wooded. My property is heavily wooded, not the applicant's property. The applicant's property between their house and my house is not heavily wooded. It's actually my woods that are there, not theirs. And between my house and their property line, it is not heavily wooded. It is really wide open. And our property line is 20 feet from their 20 feet, like 22 feet from their line. Benefits the same resident. Again, we talked about that already. The 7 future zoning plus. I think we've already talked about that. The licensing requirements, I believe, would have to be met if they were to do something like this. A hotel and commercial lodging license, which they're probably going to get. A restaurant license, because I believe they would be required to serve breakfast. If they wanted to get better breakfast, they would have to serve meals. Minnesota Department of Health, they would have to get commercial pool requirements. Sounds like maybe that's off the table, but the 5'9" high wall fence is required around the pool, which would have to be put up. Septic tank. I don't think we talked about that. We do live on septic out here. Everybody does it. This is septic compatible with this kind of use with 15, 20 people at it. And I think there's about 15, 19, and then maybe some instructors out there. You look at 20 people. I doubt the septic tank was built for that. So I think that should be looked at as well. Third-party parking plan. If you look at the parking plan, it's not much of a parking plan. It's like some sketches on that. So I believe that a plan should be submitted and approved to the fire department, to the city of Fire Lake, who's going to do that. You need to maintain egress and ingress and egress and ingress out of the property. And so if you're going to have 15, 20 cars of the property, how is anybody going to get in there? So that's the first part. And the second part, if I may approach, I'll make you a bit of a handout.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. So I want to restate that this is not a bed and breakfast. So first off, this should be designed because it's not a bed and breakfast. But now, if this is why I wanted to speak a second time about if this was going to be approved, I believe there should be conditions put in place. So I want to talk through this. So the conditions that I kind of laid out here, what I believe should be there. The first part is just kind of a paragraph or two about use. I just want to read this first one. If approved, the COP will stay with the property, and none of us will have a crystal ball of the future. The homeowner will have future opportunities to add events, and property use is not included in the condition. So again, we moved to next door, would have never thought that a $1.4 million house, 1.3, whatever was sold for, would become a VRBO. That never crossed our mind. And so these conditions here kind of reflect the unknown that might be down the road. So however, I want to just remind, this would be our only opportunity. So as the neighbors, this is our only opportunity to set criteria for this property, right? So please take that into account. They will have opportunity to make changes. We, community, will have no opportunities in the future to do that. So for that reason, I ask that you consider the proposed conditions of the listed below. So we'd ask that the homestead, the property be homesteaded. It's the only way to ensure that the property is actually going to be lived in. That the owner or manager contact information or proof of residence is provided to the city and maintained by the city. The applicant must receive a proof from Scott County that the current septic tank and mound system can support the new property use with the anticipated guest load. Property use, minimum rental is 30 nights. I know that conflicts with their plan. But if you look around to other cities, the gal back here mentioned the fact that many cities are going away from them. If they're not excluding that completely, they are putting minimum night stays on. And why are they doing that? To minimize disruption, because again, back to our health is going to be affected by the people coming and going from there. And so we'd like to see consistency in the property. So that's why the 30-night stay should be, or a minimum night stay should be applied to the property. Maximum number of guests, it's a 5-bedroom house, so I find it interesting to hear that there's gonna be 19 people at the property on a 5-bedroom house. It seems like that would not fit well on that property. No additional visitors beyond the registered guests overnight, so again, if they are gonna have that, we don't want the grandkids and the kids and the people they met at somewhere in town to come over and be on site. Property, again, the property is a septic system for 5-bedroom home. Property rental must be tied specifically to this narrative. So the quilting, baking, scrapbooking, hard making, yoga, knitting, embroidery, without this approved, who knows what will happen? Fire Lake every year has a lakefront music festival. Maybe they would just want to rent it out to the band at the lakefront music festival, right? Those are things that could happen. That if we don't condition this, those are things that really could happen. Commercial meals should be, must be provided on site. Meal service should not be allowed for additional car trips. And so what I mean by that is, think about, they want to do the, some of the, either delivery or some of the delivery services out there, they're gonna be coming and going. Again, more trips in there, more lights in their front of their house every night that we have to deal with. Exterior lights for the building code must be off from 8 p.m. to 7 a.m. all days of the week, and they must be on an automatic timer. If there's one thing that I ask the applicant to do, shut off the damn lights. They've been on for months straight, and it is like, we live next to a Walmart with all the lights on right now. Surrounding neighbors, light pollution we've had, that would serve as a calming measure. Property quiet time, we'd ask to be 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. We work full-time jobs, and so we'd ask the neighbors kind of respect that quiet. Landscaping buffer, that we asked that they put in a 10-foot minimum height and climate planting arborvitaes along the property line on their property to shield us from all of the things that are going to be happening next door. And then on the back of the property, there is no fence there. If you've driven by, we'd ask them to put a fencing, a 6-foot white, 6-foot fence up to meet the property standards. And I would extend that to like Lenny, who's right behind us, that maybe Lenny would like the fence up there as well. So I think I would extend that fencing requirement to not just our property. We have the most frontage, at least on the east side of the property, but I think others would have that same opportunity. Parking standards, no camper, RV, schools, motor coach, buses, or semi-parking. You may laugh at that, but my wife did look up the applicant's Facebook page, and on there, one of the comments was, you should put an RV parking, because then they can come and do the whole thing with an RV. So those are the things that are possible if you don't put this standard in the post. And then a third-party parking plan. So I don't believe the sketch that's drawn up should be there. I think that there should be an actual hire civil engineer. I do commercial construction for a living. We have parking plans together all the time, so you should have a third-party parking plan put together and not the sketch that's laid out there. No on-street parking, what we talked about, I think the RVO doesn't allow anyhow. No more than 5 passenger automobile vehicles there, and 1 car basically per bedroom is what we're thinking. And all vehicles must be operable with their current license and registration. No outdoor sales, flea markets, transient sales, or garage sales. We don't know what this is going to turn into, but again, all things that could happen. No exterior amplified sound. So think about the speakers and whatnot that might be happening, and people might be outside enjoying their night. We want to be quiet. We want to live next to a single family household and not next to a commercial event center. Signage standards. I know it does allow for signage in there, but we would ask there's no outdoor signage, no electronic signs or reader billboards, no banners, no window signs, printed, playing on, or tinted. Tint or glass must be 100% clear. Applicant should meet commercial pool standards, which I already mentioned. No exterior season or holiday decor, blow-offs, light displays, or shows. I don't want this to be on the biggest light display in America that we're on ABC next year. No fireworks, legal or otherwise. No fire pits, bonfires, or outdoor fires allowed. No temporary outdoor structures such as tents, gazebos, or cabanas. No permit or temporary portable potty units, restroom, washroom facilities. No mobile food trucks out there, street vendors, food beverage carts, footwear bars. No more use of golf carts, dirt bikes, which some might appreciate, motorcycles by owner manager, yes. Love right in the gym, but they didn't love it. No private pets or animals allowed. Basically horses, wild, exotic, emotional, I don't want this petting zoo. Again, this stays with the property. I have no idea what the next property owner might want to do with it. No smoking, vaping of any kind within 100 feet of the neighboring properties. No increase in impervious surface allowed from basically December 1st. No alterations or additions to the square footage of primary structure. Don't think maybe they want to, if the pool's not allowed, maybe they would improve it. Maybe they put a structure over the pool so that it does become a commercial use and then they can have that there. So we don't want to see that. No additional outbuilding structures or expansions. I think clubhouse, bunkhouse, additional garages, storage space. Exterior materials, colors should remain muted. So for the planning commission, you might be aware of the Barbie house that's in Hudson, Wisconsin. We don't want them to spite us and become the Barbie house. No tree removal without a licensed arborist recommendation. Again, the property is treed. We'd like to make sure that the trees stay in and not just cut down because they feel like cutting the trees down. And so I just asked if maybe the seeds or some reason if they're going to be, and then remove 3 trees, replaced 1 for 1. Garbage, recycling, and storage must be screened and handled by a maximum of 1 vendor. So whoever that's going to be, it's Buckingham, just one individual. So we don't have multiple trucks coming in and out. Screen storage 50 feet, 50 inches I've got, but 50 feet from the property line. I don't want the large amount of garbage that'd be right up to my fence and have to deal with, again, the neighbors' things, because this was intended to be a single family household, not a commercial event center. Annual inspection by home or property for compliance with life safety code. This is typical if it's going to be a rental property, which is what you're turning it into. That's going to have that. And the conditional use permit should be subject to annual review or sooner if 6 complaints or infractions are received within a calendar year. So I know there's a lot of conditions there, but there are 800 unknowns. And I'm going to reiterate, this is our only opportunity to put conditions on this. First off, so I'll go back to my first comment. This is not. It should be denied to begin with because it is not a bed and breakfast. It is not. I don't know how anybody can read through their business plan and go, this is a bed and breakfast. It's just not. So first off, but if you are going to prove it, I don't know why you would. Please take into account our conditions. They're more than reasonable for neighbors who live next door to the property. Thank you for your time.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak about the request for a conditional use permit?
My husband just spoke, I would like to speak on my own behalf, and we don't know. 6525170 Street East. This gentleman here brought up before that Crestview was in an HOA. Credit River has many nice neighborhoods that probably have HOAs that aren't going to be subject to whatever comes next. And so I just remind you, this type of use and allowing this type of use is going to have a significant effect on the Casey's Addition neighborhood. The people here tonight are all people either across the street or that abut the property or right behind the property. We don't want this. We want our neighborhood to remain residential. I just really want you to consider when you look at the broader community, there's a lot of homeowners associations. So if you don't happen to live in one, this could be you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Is there anyone else who wishes to speak about this particular request for conditional use permit? Is there anyone else who would like to speak about the conditional use permit? Does the applicant wish to make comment or respond to any of the commentary? Seeing none, I will ask for a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to close it.
I have a motion from Commissioner Tandy. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Commissioner Thebrath. All those in favor of the motion to close the public hearing, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? This motion carries and the public hearing is now closed. Is there any member of the planning commission who has questions, comments, concerns that they want to share or address regarding this request for conditional use permit?
I got just a couple. So Claire, is it an IUP, right? So there's a CUP, the conditional use permit, and then IUP. Yeah, so. Would one of those possibly apply to this? Just, I'm just more curious than.
Yeah, so it could, but again, the way that the use chart is set up also has which relevant applications can be used for this, for each use, and interim use permit is not listed under bed and breakfast.
Because the interim is like year to year, right?
Yeah, you can put time limits on them.
Right,
Yeah.
and it wouldn't stay with the property, so if they would sell the
Correct.
property, it wouldn't transfer.
Yeah, if this use would have had IUP next to it on the chart, that definitely would have been staff's recommendation, but since it's
Sure.
not written that way.
Makes sense.
You still
There
have a
are,
question?
oh, yeah, there are a few uses in that chart that maybe need some updating in a different topic with the commission at another meeting.
Sure. I kind of got another, just more curious than anything. So technically they could run the bed and breakfast if they have a property manager that lives there.
That is how it's written in your code.
So, like, how, I mean, if they are, how do you monitor that, or like, if they're.
Yeah, so I would say that if that is the route that the applicant may take with the recommendation of the text amendment denial, then that would be a good opportunity for the commission to possibly table this and request that information from the applicant as to what that plan would be, and because staff hasn't had the opportunity to review that and make a recommendation
Right.
based on that.
If we were to table it, what is the time frame in which we would need to make a decision?
So let me get a day calculator up, but my guess is that we'd be able to have this on the regular January agenda from
What would
It's
table
gotta be
it?
within 120 days.
But
though.
why would
from
we-
initial submittal, yeah. I'll do
What,
a-
why would we table it? What would we not, what would we know in the future that we don't know now, I guess?
I think the question that came up was, the stated plan the request has been to not have someone either live that owns or manages the property, but if the applicant were to choose to address that, Cleveland would allow us to gather that, the city to gather that information. Is that the correct way to describe it?
Yes.
Okay.
So gather the information from the applicant, whether he wants to live there or not. I guess I'm not.
Yeah, so the code also allows for a full-time manager to live there, and at this time, the proposal doesn't include that, and because they were hoping that the text amendment would pass. So if they wanted to adjust their business plan to address that, then we'd give them, if they're within the 120 days, they'd be able to.
Yeah,
make
I
that
guess
information.
my question is more, what's considered someone living, it's kind of a gray area, right?
It's the way it's written in the code is owner or manager that lives full-time on site, so.
I'm more, trying to.
It's great.
That would be their mailing address.
Right, but do they actually,
They don't have to necessarily own it based on, but they
Right,
have to
no,
be,
but
I think there's another provision. Let me switch screens here.
I think it's safe to say the neighbors are gonna know.
right.
Yeah, I mean, they have to be employed
No, I know, I'm just, yeah,
Yeah,
I'm more.
but it's great. It's great, you know.
Yeah.
I've known people that have properties in the past and the guy moves in,
Right,
but then he has a separate mailbox because he homesteads it, but he lives with his girlfriend or something.
yeah,
So there's a way that on
I-
paper it looks like it, but
right. I guess I'm more nervous that someone, a property manager lives there, but they're gone on vacation 9 months out of the year and it's, yeah. It's, yeah.
Right. It's not crystal clear. I'll
Right.
agree with you on that, but I
Yeah.
can't. I have what the code has given me.
Are there other comments, questions, concerns that the planning commission members have?
Members, the list of possible conditions offered by resident. Speak louder, because I don't have a microphone here, is, a lot of them are not unique, I think, in the big picture. Many, whether it's a commercial development or residential development that's coming in, you know, seeking cutoff lighting, landscaping criteria, dealing with the pool, dealing with noise, some of those things. Exterior apparatuses, I think some of those are not uncommon ask of conditions, so not maybe not every single one of them, but a lot of them are commonly found as conditions metro-wide for all kinds of different uses.
I'm looking at this list. Are there any of those conditions that would not be enforceable or
Probably a couple of them, I think. For example, the tree removal and some of those things, how is that enforceable? Yeah. I think dealing with items that relate to noise, light are far easier to enforce. Are than some of the other things, because those things just happen. Whereas dealing with noise and light are continuous operations that can be addressed on the front end, so to speak. As a condition, so your mind's eye, if as one of your conditions, all the exterior lighting shall be swapped to a full cutoff light, or have a photo eye, or have a timer that actually functions. That's something you can inspect, check and see is that done? A parking plan, well, they could hire a surveyor or a civil engineer as the president mentioned, and they could produce that. That's something we could check off on the front end and see that it's done. So some of those things are some of the longer things might be harder, but by and large, a lot of them are.
well, it's just helpful context.
I
Are there other planning commission members? Oh,
Yeah, just, I guess my thought would be. I mean, I get, I guess we're trying to torture the language of our code a little bit to call it a bed and breakfast, it seems to me. I mean, it's not a bed and breakfast. I mean, we've all been to one. It's for a couple. Or, I mean, you don't go to a bed and breakfast with 20 of your best friends. At least I don't. You go with your wife or significant other. And you have a specific spot that's yours, and then there is a little communal place to gather and maybe have breakfast there. So it seems to me we're kind of torturing our own language to make this happen. To me, it's they're trying to run a business, but God bless them, they can run a business, but it's not zoned to run a business. It's not a commercial, it's rural. So I guess I'm struggling of coming up with all these conditions and conditions when our code doesn't even define what a bed and breakfast is. But it seems to me this isn't. That's my comment.
And would this also, obviously, if alcohol is served, would require a liquor license too, would it not?
Well,
No?
Fundamentally, as I mentioned earlier, planning commission members. In that same statute, license is not required. Rent your room at the facility, not more than 2 glasses per day, each containing not more than 4 fluid ounces of wine, et cetera. So, I mean, these are
There goes your
these are very
customers.
minor consumption exceptions, but otherwise, if there's liquor being regularly served, then then yeah, that begs that next question.
Is it okay if it's one big glass?
Right.
That's what I would add. I would roll.
the bathtubs are.
I guess, but that was the genesis of the language, is why that definition of a bed and breakfast by the state, by our recognized authority, defines a bed and breakfast as not more than 8 rooms for rent to no more than 20 guests at a time. Located the owners, located in the same property as the owner's personal residence, provides no meals other than breakfast served to persons. And originally was a single family residence.
So in absence of the definition within our city code, we would be defaulting to the state. Is that correct?
We can't really default to it, but we're just looking at it for.
Context.
Context, okay, that's all.
As I think a resident also stated that just because the code doesn't specifically define, as we all know, common sense, common knowledge, dictionary, et cetera,
Yeah.
words have meaning and yeah. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's
it's-
tough when there's not a definition in the code.
It is helpful.
So we do the best.
Well, on the liquor license, or one of my comments was that even though there's no liquor license involved, and of course the limitations. What if the clients decide to bring in their own liquor? Is there any concerns of what they bring in? And, bring in a cake. And unfortunately, marijuana is also part of it now too.
I mean, we have conditions of approval, 721, number 5, a bed and breakfast, all bed and breakfast units shall be established within the principal structure. If I'm not mistaken, this is a big house with bedrooms.
Mhm.
Are we assigning, I mean, is the assumption they're gonna assign 5 people to a room? Or 4 people to a room and call it a bed and breakfast unit? I mean, seems like that's stretching it.
So I think that has to align with whatever the capacity for the bedroom with homes when they're inspected by the building inspector have their maximum residential capacity and what counts as a bedroom. I think that's what the units are referring to. So it'd be 2 people per bedroom. And I think that condition is also leaning to that you couldn't make the detached shed bedrooms that more guests can stay on, except it has to be confined into those existing bedroom spaces, especially back to where the intent of bed and breakfast and where these originated was single family homes that are now used for transient lodging.
Are there any other questions or comments by commissioners?
I just, it's just an idea or just a thought that popped in my head. It probably doesn't make sense, but, what if it was just a day thing and people didn't spend the night? That. I'm just I'm just thinking.
It's commercial then.
Right.
Take the bed and the breakfast out of a bed and breakfast.
No, I'm just, yeah.
It's like a daycare center for adults.
It would be more of an event center use at that point. If people aren't lodging there, then it's an event center of some sort, retreat, focus programming,
Yeah. I'm just thinking out loud.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm just taking a quick look at the findings of fact from the city.
Well, then out of curiosity, of any of the neighboring. I'm sure the neighboring cities, Prior Lake's probably gone through this. And I know a lot of times on my committees with them. And the EDAC is like, okay, what do we need to do to? Retain good businesses, be, something for an outside business to want to expand into our community, and then they went to neighboring cities and looked to see what they had done previously. I mean, we looked at neighboring city, Lakeville, or anybody that just see how they have found a happy medium or.
So a lot of surrounding cities have bed and breakfast provisions, and a lot of that I think stems from old codes. You know, but you don't find bed and breakfast super common anymore. And as mentioned in during the public hearings, in terms of short-term rentals, many of the surrounding communities don't allow for them at this time. So and a lot of that I think also stems from state law. I don't think state law has regulated short-term rentals quite to the same point as bed and breakfast. And that again leans back on liquor licensing, food licensing, hotel, that the state goes in the state's hands once bed and breakfasts are approved on a city level.
Are there any other questions, comments from planning commission members? I see in the staff report that staff recommends that the city planning commission adopt the staff report into the record, accept the application, testimony, exhibits and other evidence presented into the record. And we have options to either recommend approval, recommend denial, or could table and request additional information. At this time, do you have any other recommendations for us, staff?
No, the only thing I would say is that if you recommend denial within your motion, to also recommend that staff amend the findings of fact based on what we heard this evening and other, just because I didn't include that in the staff report, but I think there's been other relevant information from the public that needs to be added into those findings, regardless of approval or denial.
Chair, Madam Chair, would one of those potential findings of fact being for recommendation of denial be that it's fundamentally not a bed and breakfast? Is that a question that has been resolved for the planning commission members? Is that?
I think that maybe is still up for discussion and needs to be sorted out, because I think that's a fundamental finding of fact that the council and then we'll look for as we file this application.
This is where I think I'm struggling the most. So with the owner and applicants indicating that they would not be able to live on site. And no plan at this stage for an on-site manager, I'm seeing it hard. I'm finding it hard to see how this does meet the qualification for a bed and breakfast. But we have not heard whether there is an alternative plan from the owner applicant at this time. How, what are the other members of the planning commission thinking, or what other questions do they have at this time?
I guess I'd probably have to recommend the denial, you know, just clearly based on that. It's not really meeting the bed and breakfast criteria. Based on what's been presented. Now, if the applicant were to come across and change up the whole business plan and resubmit, then maybe it could be reviewed at a later date. But I mean, based on what we're presented and based on what's in black and white and based on the community's input, I guess I would have to lean towards the denial.
Other planning commission members?
I have to agree with Commissioner Thane.
Commissioners Casey and Martell.
I'm in agreement.
Same.
Do I have a motion on this request for conditional use permit?
I'll make the motion to deny it.
And any stipulations?
I guess.
Amendment.
Amend the findings of fact.
The findings of fact, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
based upon the findings of fact, what's been presented and what's in black and white. I mean, we're just trying to follow rules, regulations, laws and being sensitive to the whole thing, but that's sensitivity doesn't necessarily make things come or go, but that's just another thing to think about.
We have a motion.
I'll second the motion.
Is there any discussion about the motion? Staff, are there any other recommendations that you have for the stipulations?
Not at this time.
Okay. I have a motion and a second. Do all those in favor of the motion to deny, subject to the
Statement of
amendment of the findings of fact and adopting the staff report. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Our third public hearing this evening is on a request by the city for our next item of business is a public hearing on item 4.1, consider proposed ordinance and public hearing on proposed ordinance 2024-03 administrative citations. Commission members have received the following documents related to this item, which include a staff memo from Eric Johnson, interim city administrator, a staff memo from Pete McHale, city attorney, copy of the proposed ordinance regulating public nuisances within the city of Credit River with the tentative number I mentioned, and a copy of the proposed fine schedule. At this time, I'd ask city staff to walk us through this item and the requested action. Mr. Administrator,
You're waiting for me.
yes, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the commission. The packet on page 37 starts with the memo. But in a nutshell, the proposed ordinance outlines a administrative citation methodology where the staff and we receive complaints about a potential ordinance violation. Staff can investigate, communicate with the city attorney, we walk through enforcement process, and ultimately, if we can't gain enforcement from an ask, a kind ask, or compliance with an ask, then we can fall back to something called an administrative citation. And in effect, what it is an internal penalty that is issued by the city. There's an appeal process to the council, and ultimately, if the person does not comply with it, that is an assessable fine to their property taxes. So it's fundamentally a financial penalty. It avoids a criminal or some of those judicial reviews questions. So it really is a tool for the city to make its enforcement easier and hopefully get compliance in an easier fashion besides full-blown judicial process. By and large, to be for comparatively minor infraction, someone's got a shed or operating their property in a manner that's not consistent with the ordinance. You would deal with these for that, not criminal level or felony level matters, for lack of a better word. I'm not gonna pretend I'm the city attorney. And obviously, he provided his memo, in your packet about what it is. From a legal standpoint, and certainly have that, if you're eager to read. But fundamentally, this outlines that process, and so in order, because there's an element of zoning about this, it does require a public hearing in front of the planning commission. So if you would be so kind tonight, to open the public hearing and see if there's public comment and go from there.
All right. Thank you. We appreciate that. At this time, I will open the public hearing. Is there anyone wishing to speak on this specific proposed ordinance? Please come up to the microphone, state your name and address for the record.
Good afternoon, Tim
Oh.
Conroy, 17215 Drive. Is this gonna encompass cars, kept yards? Is this part of the ordinance you guys are working on?
Yes, sir.
And then are we also going after ATVs and golf carts and people on the streets too, or are we leaving them alone? How broad, I guess, are we
Yeah.
going? I mean, I don't want to live in an HOA,
Yeah.
but I also don't want 22 cars in my neighborhood when I'm paying big money for taxes.
Well, you're asking questions that are,
I know you're not the guy, but
well, wait a minute, yeah, I get it, but really it's a question of. It would apply to most of the city's ordinance. And so if it's an ordinance in place, we seek an enforcement action, they don't comply, well, then we would go through this process. So whatever's on the books.
22 years living here.
Yeah.
I have a significant other that has a problem with neighborhoods.
Sure.
We tried Scott County, we did our deal, we had it all lined up, we became a city. We couldn't use Scott County's legwork, we had to restart over again.
Sure.
So we're patient, but we're also, I live in a neighborhood where I shouldn't have to look out my backyard and have an SUV parked in his yard for 6 months. And he doesn't even drive it.
Right.
So it's one of those, if we're gonna put some teeth in it.
Yeah.
Let's put some teeth in it instead of just lipstick.
Well,
So I'm for some enforcement, but I don't mind the kids with their golf cart going down the street and back, or other people that snowmobile here or there. But it's, I put all my stuff away at night, I put my stuff in the garage, I maintain what I have. I'm not going down the street saying, your flag's not here, your light's on too long. I don't wanna be that guy either. Just cohabitat and enjoy the neighborhood.
I think functionally, it doesn't change what the city may enforce, it's just a question of how.
So now we'll be able to walk instead of just look at it,
Well,
hopefully.
I mean, okay, so without, short of this, you have to deal with, filing something. Going through the sheriff's office, having a criminal action,
Okay,
taking it through the court system, but this tries to circumvent something.
because we start with, hey, I see you got a car problem, can I help you? Hey, that tree fell down, can I help you?
And we do that now.
Eventually, it's, I've got my yard, I've asked, no one wants any help, okay, move on. So I'm glad we're moving forward as a city and getting after it, but I also don't wanna be, just because some neighbor down the street doesn't like that ATV going up and down. I don't wanna be that guy either.
I think we always try to. I think Matt and I and all the staff members always try to. Be kind, foster a conversation, be supportive and say, hey, here's a violation, please address this. And if it's, doesn't get done, this gives the city a little bit easier methodology besides. Getting involved with.
Well, the courts, and that takes time, and I don't want it to cost more money to go after someone, because then they get resilient, and then they get, I mean, no one's here, but a fighting over some mailbox that was in someone else's yard for 15 years, and the guy's just sitting there laughing, going, I'm not moving it.
Right.
So I'm glad we're getting something, but at the same time, we don't wanna charge you to the end of the nth degree either, but just kind of clean your area up, take care of what you have.
I think it's fair.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on this particular proposed ordinance? Is there anyone else who wishes to speak about this proposed ordinance? Going 3 times. Anyone wishing to speak? Seeing no other requests for public comment, may I get a motion to close the public hearing?
Propose we close the public hearing?
I have a motion from Commissioner Biebereth. Do I have a second?
Good. I'll second.
I have a second from Commissioner Martell. All those in favor of closing the public hearing, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Are there any comments, questions from the planning commission members on this proposed ordinance?
One comment on section 4 of the compliance letter, I think it's section B. Service, the compliance letter. Compliance letter shall be served on the owner by regular mail, sent to the last known legal address. Is there any reason why that shouldn't be sent certified?
Well,
That way there's some tracking, we know that they got it. And
What's funny about that is in the last month, I've received 2 certified letters that were actually checks. And I didn't sign for them. The mailman just threw them in my mailbox.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I don't know if just because I think our mail force is quite a bit overloaded and understaffed too, so. I don't know.
I think it would be ideal, however, from getting the letter out and getting it in the mail and
Or serving them, have the sheriff serve them.
trusting,
No.
trusting there's a faith in your postal service and all those folks that they should get it. And I do know city always would try to also make a phone call or send an email. I mean, you're not a 100,000 person city, so we're usually able to probably know the person, probably. You know, so.
Just thinking that.
Yeah.
If, I mean, if it came out regular letter, someone go to the mailbox, they had a bunch of letters, they'll put it on the counter and they sit there for 2 days before they look at, oh,
That's
something
possible.
from the city.
Or they don't answer the door, or they won't sign for it or something.
Well, and of course, yeah, there's a possibility that they won't sign for it, but then you have by personal service or posting a copy on the building or property affected by the letter. I mean,
We've
so,
done that too.
yeah, so they go there and just nail it to their front door and have your own staff. But I was just wondering why you're using regular mail versus a certified, but.
I think the last part of, we work heavily with the Scott County Sheriff's Department and they have, I can't think of what their role is, like civil, I think, just civil. And they have the one guy that has to go up to the front door to force evictions. And it's never a good situation, but then the officer hands it to them. So that's kind of like probably the last ditch effort, but I know they work good with us in that regards.
Just, that's my comment there.
Sure, just mechanically, I guess I'm on page 47, the fine schedule. So I just kind of mathematically, I guess, so each day a violation exists constitutes a separate offense. So they're in violation, you put it in the mail, it gets there 7 days later, are they out of compliance for 7 days?
You know,
Well, they gotta send it
you
in.
have some flexibility in
All right.
terms of the enforcement, but
Okay.
you could constitute it's a separate offense, but that might be distinct from the penalty.
Got it, okay. And then they have 10 days to pay it, right? Is that sign? Okay, got it.
And sometimes really even cities say, well, waive the violation fine, bring it into compliance. You know, it's not so
Yeah.
much of the financial goal, it's the getting the site into compliance, so.
Is historically, by the time you get to this, sending that first violation, have they already been notified and are aware? Maybe not,
Sometimes not,
okay.
you know, it depends.
Isn't the first step that, hey, you may not know, you're out of compliance, here's what you need to do. to
Oh,
fix
from that
it.
sense, yeah, so
So
before we
that's-
send a
Okay.
penalty,
Yeah, they
we're.
get the kind of, hey, you may not know, you're out of compliance, here's the code, and here's what you need to do to get it, give us a call, we'll walk you through it.
Okay.
We have a 3-step process.
Yeah.
It's clear indicated it's hey, the second one is hey or else, and the last one is here you go. You know, so-
Yeah. You're not just finding people.
No.
And then if they don't pay it, they tag the property.
I guess the only hang up would be this last one, code violations that significantly endanger life or create a critical unsafe conditions. It costs them $200 for that. And they got a bear trap on the sidewalk. Well, maybe we should dip in that a little bit.
Well, that's $200 in addition.
I understand. Not to exceed $1,000. I get the point.
I would change that language, but.
Just out of curiosity, this is probably fairly in line with what area communities are.
As far as I know,
Okay.
the courts
Oftentimes,
are full, the attorneys are prosecutors and jammed already, so.
yeah,
Anytime we can alleviate that, sometimes you do it from an enforcement standpoint. It's overwhelming to enforce something because you can't
Can't get it.
quickly put their feet to the fire, so to speak. So hopefully this makes it a little easier.
and it's not like our staff are necessarily equipped to be able to just go out and look for these violations. We're typically hearing about them from the community. We're not resourced to necessarily.
We're not policing them, we're reacting.
We're reacting.
Mhm.
And so it feels like this gives you a tool, or the staff members a tool that can help where one does not exist as that interim between, hey, please clean it up or please do X and getting the courts involved. And from that perspective, as I've read this, I think that it makes a lot of sense. I think it gives staff another tool that has been missing. And so, as I look at it, this seems logical to me. Are there any other comments from planning commission members or questions?
I'll just say one thing, so. Yeah, I get where the whole thing's coming from, it all makes sense and it probably needs to be done. The only part that makes me just a little nervous is I could make a list of probably 100+ properties that you could, that are not in compliance, and they haven't been in compliance for probably 25 years, and it's just, I don't think we're really open, it's, it,
I do think the council's intent, city's desire of this is to begin to enforce things that it already isn't somehow dealing with
sure,
in balance. For all of us, all of our properties where we live, we probably have a violation somewhere, let's face it. There's something that somebody could call us on and ding us on, and I don't think that's really what, but,
yeah.
Not my property, of course, but maybe all of yours.
Are there any other questions or comments from members of the commission? All right, seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to close, what are we doing, closing it?
We already closed public. hearing.
Okay.
We're looking for a motion on the item.
Oh, sure.
Approve or deny?
I'll make a motion to approve it.
I have a motion from Commissioner Casey to approve 24-3. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Commissioner Thebereth. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Our next order of business, up for consideration on tonight's agenda is item 4-2, and that is Credit River Parks Assessment Kickoff. Planning Commission members should have received the following document, which includes a memo from planners Claire Stickler and Emily Harold. Planner Stickler, take it away.
Thank you, Chair Olson. So this last agenda item has been stewing, we'll say, with staff, probably since the summer, and put this on, had this proposal on the council's agenda, and it was approved, and as part of that, their request was that the planning commission be kind of the steering committee and the guidance committee throughout this parks planning process. So this evening, I wanted to give you a broad overview of kind of the timeline and the different phases of this project and why the city has initiated doing this a little bit, so that we can, starting in 2025, do the actual kickoff meeting and kind of set all of your expectations, as this will be a standing agenda item for the beginning of 2025. I don't anticipate this process taking more than let's say, I would say 6 months, only because we want to get some good community engagement, not only within these regular meeting times, but other spots around the community and other opportunities, because evening meetings can be hard for everybody to be able to make, and we want to make sure that everybody's voice is being heard. But really, this is a big driver of this was that planner Matt did some research of the surrounding communities' park dedication fees when it came to development and subdivisions, and Credit Rivers is relatively low comparatively. Now, we know that Lakeville and Prior Lake have higher population sizes and other sewer and water and other things that are driving that growth. But there is some possibility for some maybe missing additional funding that could come out and a big part of the state statute requirements for increasing park dedication fees is analysis on park systems and park planning on a city level. So you have a really good basis in your 2040 comprehensive plan with kind of existing conditions, some high level goals and policies. And then as part of this plan specific to parks, we'd really hone in on some of those prioritizations to not only help the council with their funding priorities on their overall level on everything that they're looking into annually in their CIPs, and just some long-term, short-term, medium-term goals with not just parks, but also trails and connectivity, especially alongside of more subdivisions and development that the city will continue to get. So that's a high-level synopsis of my memo and kind of the purposes. I'd be happy to answer any questions or walk through anything additional, or if Matt or Eric have anything they want to add, but I think I covered it. But yeah, we'd start with that true kickoff meeting at our regularly scheduled January meeting, and we'd come in with kind of a summary of what's been completed in the comprehensive plan, the existing conditions assessment, and like mapping for visual aid. We can work through that, and then we'll start off with strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities activity matrices with the commission. And I guess at that point too, we'd be happy if members of the public are here to discuss. We'd be happy to have that open as well, because that will kind of be our initiation to help us guide what then we want to ask in the survey to the remainder of the community once we kind of get that local basis for existing conditions. So
Yeah.
that's what you can expect at the January meeting.
So thinking about it, 2025, I think we're still expecting the beginning of the 2050 comprehensive planning process with some system statement generation.
Yep.
And some other things. So it feels like the timing is apropos in the context of starting up that bigger planning process that we will be engaged in as well. Is
Yep.
that correct?
That is correct. Yeah. I mean, you can always, if this is completed and adopted to the standards that would be outlined in the Met Council's process, you can use this park system statement for your parks chapter in your 2050 plan, or as an appendices of the doc. I mean, the regulations change annually each process, but my assumption is that, I mean, a park system plan hits very similar things as a comp plan, obviously a little more visioned down to just park, comp plans, your 40,000 foot aerial view of the community as a whole. So your parks section is relatively goal oriented and vague. We'll get a little more nitty gritty through this process. But that, not to say that that can't be included in the 2050 plan.
Got it. And so, you know, as we were talking about, in your opening remarks, you know, there will be opportunities for engagement. In
Absolutely.
a number of ways for the public to be able to make their voices known.
Yep.
This happens to be separate from the survey that is going out and is due by January 10th, if I understand correctly. Do either of you want to offer context around that, just for the clarity of the public? And for the
Is that
commission?
from the visioning committee? Is that correct?
Well, yeah, it's for the vision committee, and the chair is in the room, but I'll do my best to mention the council appointed a visioning committee relative, citizens committee relative to what is the city's vision. They've worked for several months to discuss what those things are, and now have since sent out a 3 or 4 question survey asking residents about what they came up with about, are these the general goals that you view as consistent throughout the city? And so they just sent that out a week or so ago, and it's due as the date you said. And you know, they're hoping for a lot of response.
Yeah.
Landed in my inbox.
Right.
And I think that outcome of, you know, whatever the vision statement ends up being will be absolutely essential to the process of this plan and the guidance of the future of that, as well as utilizing the networks that have been created from some of these surveys to get the word out about this process. Now, I don't anticipate we'll get a survey out in January, so hope the survey fatigue should be, we'll wait a few, you know, we'll get some of this groundwork going on the planning commission level. And again, the public is more than welcome to attend these meetings and provide comment as part of that too. It's a fully open book process, and yeah, I don't live in Credit River. I'm happy to write the plan on behalf of you all. So I want the feedback. It's very important to a smooth process and a good plan that the council is comfortable adopting at the end of the day. So.
Yeah, for me, it's just important to be able to articulate what, you know, how these interrelate. And so this is very, very helpful from that standpoint. Are there other things that staff want us to know at this time about this process, about what to expect and our roles?
I would say, you know, we try and do a good job of getting the packet out a week in advance, so you have time to review the materials. I would say if there's anything you want to do in the meantime, take a look at the parks chapter in the comp plan. That's where we'll start. I don't intend to reinvent the wheel unless there's something in particular you don't like about one of those goals or policies, or we need to workshop that. But that's going to be our basis for moving this forward and making it more specific. So that's what I would offer in the meantime for our January meeting.
Are there other questions or comments that the planning commission members have about this item?
No, I think it's great. I mean, if we don't get ahead of it, it'll never happen. One question, and that's probably not necessary to answer, but City of Trevor, 1,500 per housing unit. I assume that's new construction.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that's not a lot of money. I hate to say that.
No.
I mean, if we get 1,000 houses in this city, and I'm not saying that's desirable. It's 1.5 million, which is a lot of money, but not.
Yeah.
Okay.
Especially in consideration of how expensive park upgrades can be. I mean, I think, you know, there was the young lady that came to city council for was it resurfacing of the basketball courts? And that doesn't seem like a very significant improvement, and it's costly. Parks, equipment, not just equipment, but yeah, pavement, trail, is all of that. It's not. So yeah, 1,000 houses for a 1.5 million project. That could be a splash pad. Not that I'm saying Credit River wants a splash pad, but just to put in perspective, that's one decent amenity.
Yeah. And our existing facilities are somewhat limited. We're really blessed in that we have the Murphy Henry and Clear Lake Park.
Yes, the regional
which are
parks.
operated regionally. But that said, you know, there are 4 neighborhood parks within our community, and they're small. but they're important resources.
Mhm.
And there, are other considerations for acquisitions and, factors as we continue to learn, grow that we need to take into consideration. I was also intrigued by acknowledging that we need to be looking at it from an ADA accessibility factor, which again is something that typically can be costly.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
being able to plan for that and making sure that we have the resources that we need is really important. And
Absolutely.
so, other questions, any concerns or comments at this stage? I'm glad we're embarking on this now. I think this is a really good timing and, look forward to the guidance that you all will provide as we work through this.
I'm glad you as a commission are excited to be working on this plan.
Anything else that you need us to know at this time?
Not on this agenda, I don't think so.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end of our items on the planning commission agenda for this evening, with there being no other business before us. Can I get a motion to adjourn tonight's planning commission meeting?
Adjourns to me.
I have a motion from Commissioner Theberath. Do I have a second?
I will second.
I have a second from Commissioner Martell. All those in favor of including tonight's meeting signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?